Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog, Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 800 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. I'm honoured today that my guest is the greatest comedy compere in Britain, and he's also my comedy brother. It's Mr. James Gill. Yes! Hello! How are you?
Well, I get quite emotional seeing you clapping there because it takes me back to the Tommyfield.
Yes. Well,
every time I walk on,
many a good night I've had there, my friend. It's just been wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. It's going to last about an hour. It's going to be all about your comedy career.
Okay.
And I want to go right back to the start and ask you, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
Sure, it was pretty much out of the womb in terms of wanting to do it, to the extent where a family holiday to the Isle of Man. I must have been about 5 or 6, and in the hotel DJ goes, "Does anyone want to get up and do a bit or whatever?" And I think he's expecting maybe a young girl to sing a song, or I don't know what he was after. And I remember saying to my family, "I'll go up and do some."
Wow.
Tell some jokes.
Fearless.
No. Please, don't do that, please. And I went up and told. I would have been so young, and that was it. I guess the bug bit then. So I'd always wanted to be a comedian, and to the extent where when Dustin G died,
yes,
my teacher helped me write. I'd have been. Maybe about 5-6 years old. And my teacher helped me write a letter to Les Dennis, telling Les how sorry I was and how much I loved him and loved Dustin and wanted to be a comedian myself. So this has been a lifelong thing. But then I became a sports writer.
Right.
And often, as a sports writer, you're working late pretty much every evening, and so it just didn't fit with the job. And so I did a few gigs a handful of gigs in my 20s, but I just couldn't make it work due to being a sports writer. And then the London paper folded, so I was no longer a sports writer. I went to Shortlist, which was a day job, and then that was it. I had no more excuses. So I was able to properly throw myself into it. But I was about 31, which in comedy is old, And then I did comedy for a good couple of years on the open mic circuit, just gigging, and then launched Always Be Comedy 10 years ago. So now we're pretending this is August, even though it's March.
It may be around about August time, yeah.
Well, June 2021, we think is 10 years of Always Be Comedy, and that's pretty much when I started comparing.
Wow. Your growing up with all the comedians was similar to mine. One of my first forays, my first ever gig was Les Dawson in Scarborough with the family, with my mum and dad and my brother, and in the same year we went to see, I think it was a year later, we saw Tommy Cooper. But there's a wonderful story for me where we went on holiday in Torquay when I was 10, and we went to see Tom O'Connor at Paynton, and I'd never heard of him, and he made me laugh. But it was the first time. It was notable because it was the first time that my loud laugh actually stopped a show. He was floored by me laughing so hard that he couldn't continue. He had to walk off and come back on again. And I thought, why is he walking off? Because I was only 10. But I thought, right, I love this. This is fantastic. And the way the comedians that you saw were similar to the ones I believe that I saw. There weren't end of the pier comedians, but there were television nightclub comedians. And that's how I first got into it. I've got a vision of looking at old seaside posters of comedians who were playing at the end of the pier and from those holidays. So you...
Well, Rich,
yeah.
Crucially, parents getting divorced when I was a very young boy is ultimately the answer to how did you become a comedian.
Right.
Because without that, genuinely, I think you need that in your locker. Now, I'm like you, I'm such an anorak of comedy. I could go through pretty much every single comedian and tell you what happened to them when they were a child, and that being the reason that they've gone on to become a comedian. So if you know, I'm sure you're like me, you've read pretty much all the comedian autobiographies.
They're all behind me.
But nearly every one of those probably had some, Steve Martin, dedicated, that whole book is pretty much about his relationship with his dad. Lee Mack in his book writes about what happened with his parents and his auntie. You can go, Peter Cook, his relationship with his dad. Billy Connolly is written about in Pamela Stevenson's book. That's well published. So I think, generally speaking, in order to be a comedian, you need something to have happened. You need that Batman Begins type moment in your childhood that sets you on that path, because you by getting the laugh, by trying to make strangers laugh, you're trying to fill that void, I think.
That's really interesting.
I'll be honest with you, I'm genuinely very grateful that happened, because you and I would not be having this conversation now without it, I don't think.
No, because a lot of them do have to, it's not suffer, but as you say, something has happened in their life that has made them do it. So can you tell me about your first ever gig? Can you remember when it was? Can you remember what you were feeling as you went on, or did you have any nerves or anything like this?
Yeah, I remember it very clearly. So this was when as I say, I was still a sports writer. So I'd done a handful of gigs. And so my first ever gig, I used to drink in a pub when I was a boozer. I used to drink in a pub called the Nell Gwyn, which is off the Strand.
Right.
And my friends and I used to drink there, some old uni mates of mine. And I, dare I say, I was it's not really for me to say, but the funny one of the group. And the landlord there was a comedian called, sorry, I'm as you know, Richard, I don't drink, so I'm drinking this delicious 0%. During Always Be Conny, I'm always drinking this 0% lager. I apologise, I just burped non-stop for about 30 seconds there. Rob Collins was the landlord at this pub called the Nell Gwyn, and my friends would always say to Rob, because Rob was also a stand-up, a well-established circuit comedian, and my friends would say, "Oh, our friend Gilly, take a look at him." And then Rob, fair play to him, it's like he called their bluff. He just went to me, "Okay, come here. I think it was like Tuesday, 7:00. Bring your material, and I'll go through it." And so I did. I like every aspiring comedian, I had secretly written a load of stuff. So I took it to the Nell Gwyn. I think it was a Tuesday. I'd have been about 26. And he took me down to the cellar where his office was, and he made me perform this routine. And he's got a real granite face as Rob Collins. And he was like, "Right, I'm just seeing I'm deliberately not going to laugh." And I made him laugh a couple of times. And he goes, this is a good story. This is a good story. He goes, "I've got a gig tonight. Do you want to come with me and watch?" And I was like, "Rob, I would love to. Thank you so much. Thank you. And then we got on the tube, and I think it was on the tube where he goes, "You're doing your first ever gig tonight."
Wow.
And I was like, "No way." And he went, "Yep." And I felt so alive, because I can remember this so vividly. I can remember every moment of every moment. And he got there. It's PJ, who's quite the character on the open mic circuit. It was one of PJ's gigs, and Rob said, "This lad can do his first gig tonight." And PJ, fair play, put me on. And do you know who went on directly after me?
What year are we talking?
Well, I'll tell you. Tim Vine.
Wow.
Yeah, Tim Vine had popped in to try some new stuff.
Wow.
He was next on that night. So yeah, the gig. I mean, the gig itself. I seem to remember. I think it started off all right, but I did. I don't. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I smashed it. But I remember the euphoria, and after the gig, I had eyes like saucers.
Yeah.
And back in those days, it's good that it was something natural that had made my eyes go like and Rob Collins goes, "Just so you know, you won't sleep tonight." And I was like, "What? Really?"
Wow.
And I went back home, and my heart was. I even remember lying in bed staring at the ceiling, just absolutely. It was pure euphoria.
This is for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that is brilliant, because the reason why I've wrote the blog is it's an enthuse for everybody who can go out and actually do this, because it's obviously not the hardest job in the world, but it must be one of the most stressful things to go out, because you have to go out and communicate with an audience within a minute, get them to really be on your side, and however original or funny or warm that you are, you've got to go and do that. It's fascinating to see, having seen so many of them over the years.
Yeah, but I always think, because people say that, and some comedians say that of themselves, like talk about themselves as if there's some sort of fucking brave warrior or whatever, and I'm like, no one's making you do it. It's your choice. No,
exactly.
You're a fucking show off. Pretend that you're.
That was the other line I was going to take.
Pretend that you're anything more than just a show off is it's an insult. No one's making you do it. No one's putting a gun to your head. You're doing it because you want to do it and you love it. So grow up.
Yeah. As I say, I've watched comedy for so long. I've seen so many compares at comedy clubs, and they're all very, very good. But I regard you as one of the best, just about. And
just, Richard, people watching, Richard wrote the best.
The best. I can't read my writing. And Always Be Comedy as the best comedy club, both live and online. How did the club start 10 years ago? Because I've been there for about 5. I went through 5 last year, but it's been going for nearly.
I think you might be 6 then. I think you might be 6.
Yeah.
Including the online gigs.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, and the honest answer is that we don't know. So it was myself and 2 friends, a lad called Paul Vale, who now lives in America.
Yeah.
That's how much he enjoyed it. He fled to another country. And then a lad well, Stuart Keeping. So it was the 3 of us who launched it. And we used to live with each other. And there was a film that we watched almost on a loop. And it was a film called Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh, I've got it there. Just the best.
Incredible film.
Yeah.
Not enough. Well, watch what you like. But it's amazing how many people have never heard of this film, given the caliber of, Emmett's play. Anyway, we'd watch this film a lot. And I don't mind admitting that it was the name was I don't mind admitting this, even though I can barely get it out of my mouth. So I think any comedian that finds it, any comedian worth their salt should find it difficult to speak positively about themselves. I want them filled with self-hatred. I don't want them to sound. I don't want cocky or smug. That's why I'm struggling to admit that this brilliant idea was my idea. But it was my idea to call it Always Be Comedy, because we watched this film. So that's from the Alec Baldwin ABC Always Be Closing. Yeah.
Always Be Closing. I never knew that.
Yes, my love. There you go.
Wow.
So that's where the name came from. But why we launched it, the 3 of us to this day, we would be lying. I mean, we could easily retrofit it as it's because you wanted to become a compere. But those 2 wouldn't have sacrificed so much time just so that I could become a compere.
Yeah.
So I honestly think we did it because those 2 used to come watch me a lot. So I just think we did it because we loved comedy, and I wonder if it's because we'd seen so many nights that weren't great, and I think I can say that because I was open mic at the time, and some of the nights are bad. So maybe we just thought we could have a crack at running a night. But even then, I'm not convinced that that's the actual answer. And then, I mean, I know I've talked about this on stage and I do joke about it, but I mean, genuinely, for the first 18 months, it was not, it was not good enough. And I nearly stopped it a few times because it was costing me money. Because the very, very first one was very successful, and that is often the case with the launch night, because it's the new baby syndrome. Oh, they've got a new comedy night in Kennington. We'll check that out. And then the numbers disperse. So by about gig number 3, it's costing money. And so, as I say, for nearly 18 months, it would have been costing me. It would have been costing me money more often than not.
Yeah.
And then Russell Kane came down. We did a charity gig about 18 months into it, and this was when Kane was Russell Kane was the first person who, while they were obviously Russell Kane is bigger now than he's ever been, but Russell was a big star back then as well, and so Russell was the first person who came down while being a big star, and you cannot emphasize enough the importance that had on Always Be Comedy. So we had people like Ramesh Ranganathan and Aisling B and Rob Beckett and Catherine Ryan and Sarah Pascoe and on, and that list goes on and on and on and on. I mean, it's insane. But all those guys, this was before they were properly breaking through. So Catherine Ryan, God love her. I remember her. I mean, I get emotional even thinking about this. There was one time we did a gig in Brixton, and she opened. She opened by saying, James, I'm going to cry here. James always booked me when I here we go. James always booked me when I was Catherine Ryan, and he booked me before I was TV's Catherine Ryan, and I thought it was such a lovely thing to say.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but I think what I'm getting at is we've had a lot of luck with Always Be Comedy, and all those incredible names and many, many more. Ed Gamble, James A. I mean, Rachel Pratt. The list is insane. But all those guys were doing Always Be Comedy before or as they were breaking through, and the fact that we've all remained pals, as you've seen with the online night the past year and a bit by the time this comes out.
My first ABC, my first Always Be Comedy 5 years ago, I was sitting midway back with Rob Collins, who I used to work with, and he invited me to come along. I was looking for a small room.
Different Rob Collins.
To go, if he's listening to this, thank you so much, because the amount of joy I've had over the 5 years, as you know, mate, has been incredible. Sure. And I sat midway back, and I was nervous. I wasn't very confident in myself, and I thought the laugh will go. And Josh Widdicombe came on, was brilliant as ever, and I laughed loudly, and I thought, I love this. And then I went back the following week, and Rob said, come and sit on the front row. And it just took off from there. I can't tell you how much you've and the club have made me a better person. It just gives me joy and positiveness and enthusiasm to do the blog, to do my job, to come to be in London, because I'm from Carlisle.
Sure.
It's just extraordinary.
And Rich, you would have lost count, literally, of the number of comedians who start their sets talking about you, talking with you. I mean, we did one of those gigs in between lockdowns. Kevin Bridges, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. One of the greatest stand-ups of all time, starts off talking about Rich. It's lovely.
I find it staggering, but I think it's done because of the enthusiasm the audience have in that room, and that's down to you and getting it together and all the rest of it. Everybody who I've spoken to, the majority of the comedians who I've spoken to, certainly who have played Always Be Comedy, always mention the club, which is just extraordinary.
No, it's nice.
And what has delighted me as well over the last 6 months or so is it's not just me praising the club through my blog, which I do constantly, you're also now getting recognised in the media, on television, and that is just wonderful to see. Because it's such a good night. It's so euphoric. I could just keep praising you all night for doing it. Anyway, let's go back to you being a comedian for before the comparing. What has been have you had a really awful gig? You must have had terrible gigs to get the experience to become a good comedian.
Yeah, I think I think the worst ever was I'm not, you know what, I probably won't say the comedian. I know this comedian has told this story, but because they're a friend, I'm not comfortable saying their name.
Well, it's up to you.
No, I don't. No, they're a very dear friend. But there was a good friend of mine turned up in a bad way, and that was the. I mean, I've done well over 1,000 gigs. That was probably the worst. So there was a hen party in, and this was before the club was popular, if memory serves. So there was a hen party in. They were hammered. There were 19 of them, absolutely smashed, and there could only been about 30 people in the audience. I mean, it was a disaster. It was just a disaster, and they were there to see the act who was, let's say, let's say not well, and the act threw up into another act's guitar case.
No.
Yeah. So this guy went on stage and he's trying to play the guitar, and he said on stage, he was like, I can feel the sick sloshing about in the guitar.
That is unbelievable.
I was personally mopping I was on my hands and knees mopping sick up. And then I just thought it couldn't get any worse. And a well-known comedy critic walked in.
No.
Yeah. It was like a farce. I mean, you couldn't make it up. So I had this hen party just like ruining any chance of the gig being salvageable. Mate. Sick in the guitar, mopping up sick. And then I'm sure there was one other incident. Anyway, then this critic walked in. It was like you could not make it up. If you were doing a sitcom about the comedy circuit and you reenacted what happened that night, the audience would be like, "Nah, you've gone too far here." But I had a really good think about that question, and my soul kept coming back to that event, and so it was wretched. It really was. Yeah.
So when you were a comedian, presumably, I'm guessing you must.
I would say that the MC is a comedian, but you're not doing sets.
No, yeah. There's a difference between obviously a comedian and a compere, but you must have trained as a comedian to become a compere. Is that right, or were you straight into the comparing?
No. I was doing stand-up sets for a good few years before.
So did you do like 5-minute sets with friends going along and all the rest of it? Because I've done that a lot. Going
5s, 10s, building up to 20s.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then I got into comparing. You know what? Sometimes the universe makes the decision for you. So what happened was, and I was still doing. I mean, I still do the odd set now, but
yeah.
I was still doing sets and comparing simultaneously for quite a few years.
Right.
And I was so much better at comparing because what was happening was other professional nights were snapping me up to compare, whereas the stand-up sets, I never truly fully graduated from open spots. Like up the creek would have me on a weekend as the 10 in the middle.
Wow.
But I mean, I love a fake graph. But if you imagine, I started comparing and that went like that, whereas the stand-up was always.
I see. Yeah.
So the decision was made for me, really.
Yeah.
Comparing was just a much better fit.
Yeah.
and I just enjoyed it so much more as well, you know.
Well, that leads me on to my next the next.
Can I answer the best gig?
Say again.
I'll tell you what the best gig was. If that was the worst gig, it would have to be the Leeds Festival to 70,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah,
that
the bit
must have
with
been daunting.
It was, yeah, the bit. But I know I've talked about it. Always be comedy, but Joe Thomas and I had to go out to 70,000 at the Leeds Festival and do this bit to get these crowd shots, and that was the best because it could. I mean, Joe and I are both were very similar in terms of very self-deprecating to the point of self-hatred. But if he was here now, he'd say the same. It couldn't have gone any better.
Wow.
But before, we were
incredible.
Oh, but we were in a terrible state beforehand. I mean, we were, you know, hands on our knees, deep breathing, you name it. And then once I went out first, and it went, honestly, it was very apparent very quickly that it was going well. And then Joe came out and he was enjoying it. And as we walked off, Joe put his arm around me and said something. I think he said, "Yeah, that went all right, didn't it?" Which for Joe to say that is the equivalent of like, "Oh my God, that was extraordinary," you know. But that was again, you know, that first ever gig. That was one of those things that I can remember every moment of every moment. You know, we had to follow Two Door Cinema Club because there was this little gap where we could film this bit. Yeah. I remember wow. Stepping over the cables to get to the stage, and I think I must have gone on with a mic. Yeah, stepping over the cables to get to where I needed to get. That opening line, I got a laugh pretty much from the off, and we were away. I think my opening line was something like, "Me and some friends, some people I know are shooting a film, and tell you what, we could really do with 70,000 extras." And the crowd, thank fuck, just got it like that because they knew what we were after.
They were away. That must have been amazing.
It was amazing. There was one bit where me and Joe were doing this stuff, and it was going that well. I started doing a dance. It was so well. I started from nowhere. I was like doing.
I bet
this
it was better than my singing.
No, that was. I think we both know that in life, when a good thing comes along, you've really got to appreciate and be grateful that it happened, and that's it. Wow. I mean, I think about that. I reckon I think about that even fleetingly every single. I think because the stakes were so high, so I think about that literally every day of my life.
That is a fantastic story. You appear to be extremely confident on stage, and you are brilliant with audience interaction. Do you suffer from any nerves before you go on stage, and how do you cope with them?
Yeah, so I'm a big. I mean, I've read a lot of self-help books, and performance anxiety comes up in quite a few self-help books. And from what I've read and from what I feel and from what I've experienced, I welcome nerves, and nerves are a really good thing. And I think you need nerves in order to deliver, and something to, a bit like reacting against that childhood divorce. You need the nerves to play off. Yeah. And when I say the worst thing in the world, I don't mean it literally, but the worst thing in the world in terms of what we're talking about is when you're not up for it, and they're the moments where you're on stage and the little voice in your head is going, mate, you're not feeling this, because this is a rocket, one of my kids, so I use this as a mic, but you're literally standing there and the voice in your head is just saying, mate, you're phoning this in. And so when you're not up for it, you're sat on the train home and the penny drops that the whole gig passed you by, and you're like, oh, what a wasted opportunity. Wow. And there's nothing worse than when a crowd's red hot, and you've not been nervous and you've phoned it in, and it's like missing an open goal. It's you really kick yourself. So yes, I wouldn't say do I suffer from nerves. I enthusiastically welcome nerves and gobble them up. And I'm someone who really thrives on nervous. As you can tell, I'm very animated all the time. So nervous energy is like my best friend, I think.
You mentioned before the film Glengarry Glen Ross, and Glengarry Glen Ross stars Jack Lemmon. Jack Lemmon has always been my favourite actor. And at the American Film Institute, they gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he said, whenever I film, whenever I go and act, a little voice goes in my head and says magic time, and then I go and do the performance. And when I sit in the front row, I can see you psyching yourself up when Pearl Jam plays.
That's right. Yeah,
and it's a similar thing, because you're then released and you are the best compere in Britain. To get whoever they are, you always try and involve absolutely everybody, and it's just joyous to watch. And everybody who I've taken a lot of friends to see Always Be Comedy, and if they've never been before, everybody's talking about you as the compere, making the glue. And that's why a lot of the acts, you say you're friends with them all, they all want to come back. You know, and you've created an absolute wonderful thing. So,
but I mean, what you're saying there's times there where, I mean, like, you see me psych myself up.
Yeah.
You know, if I've had a, I mean, when I was juggling it with I mean, thank God I'm full time now. But when I was juggling it with a full time job, if I'd had a shit day in the office, I'd have to like the Ultimate Warrior, like trying to dig deep and get something out of myself. So I mean, you know, at warm-ups on the set, I'm often writing things on my hand. So like, I'm writing like, remember when Ed Miliband wrote Happy Warrior? I don't even remember that. Hang on, Jay. Ed Miliband wrote on a pad of paper, Happy... Jay.
Hello.
Jay, what are you doing? It's a very serious interview. Jemima, this is like Panorama. What are you doing? Jay, we need you.
Hello.
Say bye to Reg.
Give me a kiss, good night. Give me a kiss.
Hello. How are you?
Love you. Oh my God, Rich. Hey.
Fatherhood.
Oh,
hello. How are you?
Just say
You
hi,
had a
Rich.
good day?
You had a good day?
No.
No, I haven't. No. I bet you have.
That's a gross.
I bet you had a wonderful day.
Oh my God! All right, girls, say goodnight. Oh my gosh! Right, night, girls.
Night. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you.
I'm gonna say night. Say night, Rich. That was nice, Jemima.
Night. Sleep well.
That was sweet.
Bye. See you another day.
Night.
Nice, Jemima.
Sleep well.
All right, you turned that around. Well done. Well done, girls.
Fantastic.
Ed Miliband.
Just the best. Fantastic.
Yeah, God bless them. So Ed Miliband, I think, was giving a speech, and he'd been like some sort of zoom lens camera must have seen that he'd written Happy Warrior. I think it was on a pad.
Yeah.
And he got rinsed for this, but that is exactly the sort of stuff I write down. So if I need to psych myself, I mean, I always need to psych myself up. Not always, but but with warm-ups especially.
Yeah.
Tom Allen, God bless him, very kindly bought me this. I've still got it just down there actually. This leather-bound notebook, and so before warm-ups, if I need to dig deep, I will write things down to motivate myself.
Yeah.
I take that, I mean, like, that was lovely what you said there, but I take it really seriously.
Well, it's meant, because you, as I said at the start, you've helped me enormously. I've had awful times in my life and awful days at work and all the rest of it, and you go there, and I sit in the audience sometimes and I think, I really can't be bothered with that. But then with this tonight, but then you come on and you're so full of beans, you cannot help but enjoy what you do and what the club is, and that's why I keep coming back. And thank God, I always say thank God I'm part of it, because it helps me as an individual enormously. It really does, because it just makes my week. What do you think makes a good compere?
Are you definitely recording this, Rich?
Yeah, I can edit it.
No. It's just because normally it'll say like recording or whatever, but it doesn't say it. But
No,
I'm sure
no. I'm doing this through OBS. I'm doing this through another piece of software, and it's recording it for me. Please don't.
I feel terrible. I'm such a worrier, though. You can tell that I do these podcasts on this Zoom.
It's not definitely being recorded. Yes.
What makes a good compare? So I think compare. I would. It'd be very self-aggrandizing to answer this through myself. So if I say, let's say, if we take Jen Brister, who I think is fantastic. Yeah. So I would say she has control of a room. She has complete authority, but she's also very, very, not obviously Jen. I mean, I know she wouldn't enjoy these compliments, but even Jen not enjoying the compliment is part of her persona. Yes, so obviously, her persona can be quite angry and but even when Jenny's been worked up, this is key. She's very, very likable, and so the first time I saw Jen Brister compare, within seconds, I was like, I want to become really good friends with which it's like a stalker. I managed to do it. No. But I guess I think generally speaking, surely a compare. I bet there are examples of ones who aren't, but you've got to be like, I think you've got to be warm and likable, I suppose, haven't you? And Jen is. Yeah. You wouldn't like me saying this, but she's warm and likable even when she's being worked up about something. She's got that quality where I want to be her pal.
There's something more than just telling jokes. I always think, and you want to go and have a drink with them afterwards, or you want to have a chat with them afterwards. They're very endearing on stage, or they're very warm. And there's another level again where you don't have to do anything. So you're twiddling your glasses or your fez, or I'm talking Eric Morecambe or Tommy Cooper or even Peter Kay or Dawn French and the likes of that. I mean, one thing you've got to remember that the night comes first and not you. So I've seen compares go on and just do a set and then get the first act on, and you just think, you fucking shithouse. Yeah. So it's all about. It's got to be about. If you're just coming on and doing a set and then going, "No, your first act is Ed Gamble." Well, you're an act. You're not a compare, are you?
You've got to set the. Jarth Regan once said to me, and he meant it in a nice way. He says, "You're like a snooker referee, and that the table is perfectly set." I hope he didn't mean it was deafening silence. What he meant was the conditions were perfect, and so when that first act comes on, if that room is rocking, you've done everything that you can for that act to have a great set. And so when I go home at the end of the night, if that whole night's all about the overarching theme is the night, as long as that whole night was great, you've done your job. That's the most important thing about being a compare. The night comes first.
One of the best nights I had there was when it was my 50th birthday, and it was a complete surprise.
Genius.
I couldn't believe how well it had been set up, and I was so emotional that night. I walked through the audience and everybody sang happy birthday, but there was like a settee on stage for me, giving me drink and cake, and the comedians and you were just fantastic. It was great.
Every comedian went for that, didn't they? They loved it. They loved that you had your own seat.
Matt Ford and Phil Wang, they really did take the piss.
Matt Ford and Phil Wang, that was a great. I remember that night. That was a great night.
Yeah. Superb. I think you've already answered this. Do you prefer comparing to delivering a routine?
Yeah, I do. I enjoy delivering a routine, and it's lovely when you've got a routine that works, and you've got a bit coming up that is going to that's going to bang hard, and getting laughs from bits that you've prepared. That is a beautiful feeling. But yeah, I do prefer comparing. I love that I MC a lot for the 99 Club, and they've got a room called Ruby Blue in Leicester Square, and that can be rowdy. Yeah, and that is a great feeling on a Saturday night when you are in complete control of that potentially rowdy Leicester Square room. Yeah. Because you get the first act and you do walk off, and it does sound a bit arrogant, but you do think, that was pretty good. Because that room can be like the Wild West, and if you walk off and you've got the room rocking, then it's a pretty sweet feeling.
That's great. How do you cope with any difficult audiences? It's very, very rare I've seen you with them, but do you have a routine? Do you have a way of dealing with them?
Yeah, so in terms of any trouble, I have, it might surprise you, I have a real zero tolerance policy. I heard a story about Peter, I'll stick allegedly in this, but a friend of mine went to go see Peter Kay and they reported back. It was reported, I think that's fine. I went to go see Peter on this tour. It was the Mum Wants a Bungalow tour. So I saw him at the Apollo. A few nights later, a friend of mine went, and Peter Kay walks on stage, and a guy, I won't say what the guy said, but heckles something not very nice. And Peter Kay just went, oh, but by the way, I must say, I am firmly on Peter Kay's side with this story, right? Peter just goes, get out. And everyone in the Apollo laughs. And Peter Kay just goes, no, I mean it, get out. And I think some people think he's joking. And Kay goes, trust me, he will ruin the night. And Kay waited until security came in, again, reportedly. And as they kicked this guy out, his mate went, oh, you dickhead. As if to say, these tickets cost a fortune. They were like gold dust.
Yeah.
We were kicked out before the show has even started. And then they kicked him out, and then Kay just cracked on, right?
Brilliant.
That I totally agree with.
Brilliant.
And so back up, I've heard Phil Jupiter tell a story. He was on tour back in years ago. I think it was somewhere on the coast, and he's doing his tour show. And I know this used to be the way with hecklers, and he said a guy heckled him from the first minute to the last.
Wow.
And Phil Jupiter said he spent the entire evening dealing with this heckler. And then anyway, gets to the end, Phil Jupiter says, thanks very much, good night. And the guy walks to the front of the stage and goes like this to Phil, puts his hand out up at the stage, puts his hand out as if to say, put it there, partner. And Phil Jupiter was like, what are you talking about? You ruined the show, dickhead. And so I think people who don't know much about live comedy think that heckling is the norm, whereas these days the zero tolerance thing is much more the norm. And again, it comes back to that. The evening comes first. It's not the good of the show.
Yeah.
So I think I've seen people look at me really surprised when there's been a dickhead and I've just had them kicked out. And I think people have looked at me as if to say, what, are you not going to engage in some sort of badinage with this? And I've just learned, no, because that person will just be a dick all night. And so just fucking get them out. I remember doing a gig with Chris McCausland, and this was in central London, and someone was just non-stop talking. And Chris, and I'd already told them to shut up. And I put, you start off, you do it humorously, you get them with a gag, and then they still carried on talking. I was like, you've really got to stop talking. And then Chris comes on, they're still talking. He puts them down, they're still talking. Chris eventually just goes, he sat down and he goes, I'm not going to carry on until that person has been kicked out. And that was on, and then I personally had to go over. And again, I'm with Chris.
So.
I'm with Chris. It's a difficult audience.
We're not here to hear them. We're here to hear the acts.
Exactly. Back in the day, that sort of thing was more de rigueur.
Yeah. Of course, I remember. Yeah.
Comedian Mercy's heckler, brilliant. Yeah. These days, no, fucking hell. That person over there might have paid for a babysitter. That person over there might be their first night off in fucking weeks. That person, everyone in that room has got their own stories to why they're there. They don't want to hear some fucking wanker.
Yeah, exactly.
Shouting out every 2 minutes. So difficult audiences, as I say, I surprisingly have a real zero tolerance policy when it comes to that. If an audience is difficult in terms of hard going, I just go, I give absolutely everything. And I'm sure you've seen me do that.
Yeah.
So I did an improv course. 5 levels of this improv course, Monkey Toast. Did it years ago, but I really think it helped with the comparing. David, you're welcome. And he told me this story. Will Ferrell on SNL, when a sketch was tanking, Will Ferrell would deliberately go over the top in terms of energy, because his policy was, if this plane is going to crash, then let's have some fun with it. You know? And so if a crowd is hard work, I will just give absolutely everything, and when it works, it's so pleasing, because you know that you've dug deep, and but yeah.
When I went to Headliners on a Saturday, I go there quite a bit, and Ricky Grover was on stage. He walked on, and there was a really horrible heckler in the front row, just being loud and noisy. Yeah. And infamously, he jumped down and he physically threw him out. And because Ricky Grover is an ex-boxer, he came back on stage to the theme of Rocky. And the audience just loved him instantly for it. And so it worked both ways. He did the best set going. I think it made the paper, the fact that he threw him out. But you're so right. I'm 100% behind you. You know,
I mean, 99. They're brilliant.
Yeah.
I love emceeing for them. They're brilliant nights, but they've got these showrunners, and these showrunners are great. That's how I met Tim Lewis. So one of the anyway, I met Tim Lewis at another gig, but that's how we've become friends. And the showrunners, we have this trust, and they might say to me at a break that guy, let's call him Clive or whatever. That guy Clive, do we need to kick him out? And I'll go, no, actually, he's great value. He's enjoying the night. No, he's fine. But then other nights, I'll go, that guy, front row, 2 from the right. I'd be very surprised if you don't end up kicking him out. And so, that really helped.
So you must be circling the room, but in a very positive, enthusiastic way. But as soon as anything, because of all the experience that you've had of doing it, you must know or take a very good calculated guess.
You can tell when someone sometimes someone just needs attention, and so sometimes just by engaging with them, that can solve the problem. But you've also got that sixth sense when someone is just a dick. And I mean, oh mate, there was one time on Always Be Comedy, and I still think about this. She seemed so normal. And that's a ridiculous word to use, but she was quite a young girl. She seems, because what I mean is if a guy's sat there and he's like, then that's not, that. But this girl was so normal. But she was sat with a mate I remember at the back by that cupboard. She just literally would not stop, like at this volume, talking to a mate. So again, I've tried to hush her with a gag. Second time, probably gone a bit, bit firmer. And then the third time, like, dude, you just stop talking. And then the first act came up, and again, trying to do their set, and he was like, "I'm sorry, can you stop talking? Can you stop talking?" And we actually had to, at the break, we were like, "You're gonna have to leave." And she was like, "What?" Couldn't believe it. I remember her boyfriend wrote in the next day,
right,
to say he was mortified, just to say I am so deeply. I don't know why I've brought that up, but I think I'm bringing it up because it happens so rarely at Always Be Comedy that on the very rare occasion it does happen, it sort of takes your breath away,
When I went to see a play about Tommy Cooper once, and it was a packed audience, and I went and I'm laughing very, very loudly, and we had the interval, and in the second half everybody around me had left, and he wondered why everybody had gone, and it was my laugh. But we're not talking about enjoying yourself, we're talking about if you've got a difficult audience, and
exactly
so,
well, no mate, you can't be criticised for enjoying yourself.
No, exactly.
It's a fucking comedy night.
You've also done a lot of TV warm-up work, and the one that comes to mind for me is when we went to see a recording of Matt Ford's TV show, and you got me up from the audience to do my classic song. Does working in TV differ from live stand-up?
Yes and no. My persona is pretty much exactly the same though. And so I get a lot of TV warm-up through comedian pals with whom I've gigged a lot. And so they want me to do what I do as an MC, as a TV warm-up, in terms of they want me to get that crowd up. They want that same energy. They want that positivity. So in terms of the persona, when I say persona, it's not an act. I mean, it's the same as what I am now, really, isn't it? You know, so no, not really, because I'm playing it the same way. Now there are certain rules in TV. You know, there's certain points that I need to hit as a warm up that are different to a club. But I think it's in a similar postcode, certainly. I think you have to love people. I love people, and so TV warm up, you're playing to people from all backgrounds, all ages, and that's something that I absolutely love. So I take my MC skills into TV warm up, certainly.
I've been to many a TV recording over the years, way back, and I used to go to Parkinson every Thursday night. I used to love that. But my favourite, one of my favourite TV comedy recordings was we were in the audience for Have I Got News for You when Bruce Forsyth did his first time, and nobody knew he was going to appear, and it was just to watch him with an audience was incredible. And there's a bit in it where he does a thing called Play Your Iraqi Cards Right, which was around.
I remember
and he's trying to read an auto cue, and he's going da 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 da, and I'm sitting above Ian Hislop's head, and he turns round and he looks at me convulsing and goes, "Please, please, this is satire." And it was one of the first times my laugh actually got on television.
Amazing. I think Brickstock was on that.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And I said to him at the Rachel and Marcus shows that always be comedy do. He said, "Oh, were you there?" I said, "Yeah, I was." Yeah.
That's great.
So it was me. Anyway, to date, what's been your comedy highlight?
This.
Well, thank you. I was just thinking before we did this, when you interviewed me when I first came to Always Be Comedy, and you were staggered at the amount of acts that I'd seen.
Yes.
And the little video I found, and I've put it on the blog, and that is a reason for doing the blog, because it started off as a list.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Well, as well as this, I'd say Harry Hill's Club Night.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
He
definitely.
is such a great comedian.
Well, it's just such a kind thing for him to do. As you know, I've been his warm up for a few years, and so for him to
give you a routine.
Quite a good story. It's quite a good story, actually. So I've been his warm up for a few years, and then he goes, "Let's go." I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story, because maybe I shouldn't tell this story. Because let's go for a meal. You pick the restaurant. And so I said to him, I didn't know that he was going to ask me to appear on Harry Hill's Club Night, because we are friends. So I said to him, I'm going to pick my favourite restaurant, and this will be my treat. And Emily's always right. She goes, "There's no way he's going to let you pay." And I was like, "Trust me, Emily, I'll pay for. This is my treat as a thank you to Harry for me being his warm up for all these years. This one's on me." She was like, "No, this is a terrible idea." So I picked this restaurant called 34 in Mayfair, which is. I reviewed it when I was at Shortlist. I reviewed it years ago. This restaurant is extraordinary. So I thought, anyway, Harry Hill, we sit down to eat. I mean, fantastic evening. Was for me anyway. During the main course, he goes, "I want you to appear on," and I was like, again,
wow.
I remember it so clearly. It's amazing. I was like, "Harry, thank you so much."
Wow.
Anyway, the bill comes, and I had it all planned. This one's on me, and he was having absolutely none of it.
Wow.
But I promise I went with the best of intentions of paying for it. No, so that.
But how good of him to do that? How good of him to give you that chance to go on?
So kind, so kind, and that was a real thrill, and that was. yeah, that was lovely. That was a really lovely evening and very kind of and Rachel Parris was there,
Yeah.
so it's nice to have a good pal on the same show. Yeah, it was a lovely Magic Cup. One of those, you know,
Just
that's like my FA Cup final. That,
Yeah. We're all living in strange times. It's been a horrible 18 months or whatever. Online gigs, how have you found them as opposed to live stand-up?
I could not love these online gigs more, to the point where
They are brilliant.
I love them. And when I know, all right, look, I know comedians are only pulling my leg, but when comedians say disparaging things about online comedy, again, the little voice in my head's like, I feel very protective of them. So I love them a great deal. I've been introduced to people I wouldn't have met otherwise. You know, think of like Katrina and Doug up in the northeast.
Yeah.
We've got viewers in Scotland. We've got Marie over in Hanoi.
Yeah.
We've got Doug in America. You know, and the fact that all these people come together, I feel very blessed and I'm very grateful for them. I love the format. I love when we've got the grid up and I'm doing crowd work.
Yeah.
Or like the show with Al Murray that we do on a Monday, and Al's doing crowd work. I mean, I think it's a dream. So I absolutely adore these online gigs, and I would love to keep doing them.
Well, I think it will happen. I think even when the clubs open again and the theatres where all the comedians go, I think they'll do like a streaming, like if they're doing a 4 or 5 nights a week, one of them will be streamed, so it'll give everybody the chance to get to watch them who may not be able to go or whatever, you know. So,
I agree.
Yeah, I think.
I remember. I know some people say that, you know, in terms of that live laugh, you know, in the crowd. You know, you get like this rolling laughter, and I know that can be trickier over the internet, and I get that. But nevertheless, they are different. But I really, love is not too strong a word. I really love the online nights.
It's interesting from the people I've been talking to, because some of them haven't done any and won't do any.
That's right, yeah.
And some of them embrace it. And I find that interesting. Do you think that's because of the style of their comedy, or what?
Well, I mean, you know, you've heard quite a few comedians say this. They've got to the end of their set and they've gone, "Oh, I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to do this, but you know, this is great fun." You know, and then that same comedian who's avoided it for months, the next day, if you've got any more of those, I'll be up for, you know.
Yeah.
So I do think that those who, I mean, look, some people don't want to do them, and I obviously I totally respect that. But I think some people who haven't done them, I think would be pleasant. I mean, some might not be pleasantly surprised, but some would be pleasantly surprised in terms of how much they enjoy them. And the feedback we keep getting is that this is the closest you can get to a live gig, thanks to people like you. You know, thanks to that virtual front row providing those laughs. You know, and also crucially, when something's not funny, those silences. You know, because that's what it's all about. You know, me. I mean, Romesh tells that story. I won't mind. Romesh tells the story where he did a gag, and he goes to everyone, "Oh, did the internet freeze then?" And everyone on the grid went, "No." And Ron was like, "Okay, on to the next gag." But look, I think it's very telling that those who have adapted.
Yeah.
Romesh Ranganathan, Al Murray, Joe Caulfield, Rachel and Marcus. You know, it's no coincidence that these are guys who've been brilliant across a number of years. And so, you know, take Joe Caulfield, undeniably brilliant as a stand-up. It should be no surprise that I'd put her in like of all the online comedians, she's top 5, top 3, you know.
Yeah.
Because she's taken those same levels of excellence that she has in the live arena and taken them to online. I find her such an inspiration.
She is. What I love about her is every time I see her, it's different material.
100%.
And you think, how do you get that level of how do you change your material all the time?
I agree.
I've got a question. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
Well, present, Joe Caulfield is absolutely one of my favourites. Kevin Bridges, I know I talk about Kevin a lot. People, people I consider friends, but Nick Kelm, Sarah Pascoe, Ramesh Ranganathan. But I think you can take all those guys as given. Rachel and Mark.
Of course, yeah.
All those guys just. I'm not just saying that because I'm a love you. I mean, you and I have been stood in the same rooms as we're gasping for air through laughter.
Yeah.
The biggest one is David Letterman. I mean, he doesn't really do comedy anymore,
wow.
but I first got into the Late Show as a teenager, and
wow.
there was just something about the guy. It was like
brilliant. Yeah,
it was this is the comedy I've been. I mean, as a kid, I loved people like Russ Abbott and Les Dennis, and things like the Mary Whitehouse Experience as a teenager and all that. But when I got into Letterman, would have been about 15, maybe 16,
wow.
And it was like like music fans talk about seeing the Beatles at the Cavern Club or whatever it might have been. That moment where you're like, oh, this is the guy for me. That I had that with Letterman, and still watch his old bits now on YouTube at night.
We went on holiday in the 80s, 90s to New York, and I queued from lunchtime to try and get in to see him, to see the Late Show, and I couldn't get in. I was absolutely fuming. I
apologise for what I'm about to say. I twice was in the audience for Letterman.
Don't apologise. That's fantastic.
once was in '99, and then once was towards the end of his time there, and I went with Emily. And
wow.
Justin Bieber was a guest. Oh, so he was a guest. Brian Regan was the stand-up, and I interviewed Brian Regan a couple of years ago, and I said I don't even remember that particular show, and the reason why I remembered it so well is because while he was on stage doing his stand-up, he could hear this scream behind him, and it was Bieber leaving the building.
Wow.
And he was that close to saying to the audience, "Oh, Brian Regan, who's like, I think he's Jerry Seinfeld's favorite stand-up. That's one of his claims to fame. He's a clean act, incredible comedian." And Brian Regan said that he nearly said to the crowd, "Oh, did you all hear that?" And he was like, "Thank God I didn't, because what an idiotic thing to say." They'd have gone, "No," and he'd have killed it. He's doing his TV set. It would have, But yeah, the thing with Dave, it's been. I think it was Letterman that we described. It's been described as dumb comedy done by smart people.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I mean, we did a bit where I plugged the wire into my head, pretending that pretending that the technology was reading my thoughts to guess what Anne, one of our front row regulars, was having to drink. And that's a very Dave-esque, very dumb. But it worked, and we designed. It went well. That's definitely a Letterman-esque gag.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to see Bill Hicks in Britain.
Wow.
And he, Letterman used to always invite him onto his show, regardless of what he was going to say, and he kept inviting him on until I think he did eventually get censored off. But he made sufficient appearances to get his name known, and that's how he started touring and everything. So
Dave actually got Bill Hicks's wife. Dave got Bill Hicks's mother on the show to apologise.
Right.
For the time he censored him.
Right.
And Bill Hicks's mum came across really well because she accepted the apology, and you knew that apology was needed.
Yeah.
And I think she said something like, "Yeah, I accept your apology." I said something like, Bill would have appreciated that. Words to that effect.
Yeah.
But she wasn't letting him off the hook. She wasn't going,
He was.
Don't you worry about it, Dave. There was none of that.
No.
I really admired her. She was great.
He was an extraordinary act to see live. I was so lucky. I saw him at midnight at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, and we were very, very lucky to go.
Rich, that's amazing.
And he did an hour and a half. Just before we go.
You know what? There's something Bill Hicks said about music. He's talking about boy bands, comparing them to the likes of Jimi Hendrix and The Who and Led Zeppelin and all that. And Bill Hicks, the point that Hicks is making, he's talking about music, but he says, play from your fucking heart. You know
yeah.
Fucking heart. And I'm a bit like that with comedy. I like the comedians that play from their heart.
Well, it shows, mate. When you do the shows, it shows. We can see that. We can see you're giving your absolute all to entertain us.
But I think all the guys that play always play. I think they all play from their heart. No one phones it in.
Yeah.
No one is jaded.
Everybody wants to play the club, and that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just before we go, and I could talk to you all night, my friend.
Easily.
Really, I could. Is there anything else you would like to say? Is there anything you'd like to promote? Anything?
Well, there's one thing that we're going to talk about. Do I go to gigs as a member of the audience?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I would say before I became a comedian, yes, very much so.
Right.
And when I was at university, I went to the gigs at uni every single week. It was on we'd go every Thursday. I mean, this, I'm like you. Comedy's been I've been in this for the long haul. This is a lifelong thing, But when I was at uni, I saw people like Julian Barrett and Noel Fielding and Peter Kay. Before he was famous.
You and me both. I saw him in Jabez Clegg in Manchester, Peter Kay, and he was on a bill of 5 acts, and he was 4th on, and I laughed so hard I missed the 5th act. And I was laughing so hard, and I said to my mate, he's going to be a superstar. And only later on, I admitted to Dave Gorman that he was the 5th act. And he went, oh, mate, he was brilliant. He's great. And Dave Gorman I've seen many times since. But Peter Kay I absolutely love. Yeah.
But not these days. It's trickier. To go to gigs just with the kids, but also because I gig and warm up.
Of course.
Generally six nights of the week, and so if I am going to go see someone as a member, I went to go see Catherine Ryan when she did that run at the theatre. Ramesh and Bridges at the Apollo, and so if it's a special occasion, but if on the very rare occasion I've got a night off, if I said to Emily, I'm just going to pop down to whichever comedy night, she'd be like, are you fucking joking?
That is a reason why I skipped over that question. Nice.
No. But before I was a comedian, absolutely. I was.
The reason is because I've asked that question to a lot of comedians. The answer is always no. So I then say, if you're on a comedy bill, do you stay and watch the comedians? And the answer, majority is always yes. But even I can't do comedy 7 nights a week. But
that question should stay in though, because you could say before you were a comedian, were you a comedy fan? Because what's common is a lot of comedians were not fans of comedy and they just got into it for whatever reason.
Right.
There's not that. Some comedians were comedy fans, but not everyone.
Yeah. It's interesting. Just before we go, have you got anything to promote, or where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. Please visit the website Arichcomiclife.
That was going to be my final question. I'm off to go and find our family tree because I'm certain we are related if we both like comedy as much as we do.
I know, yeah. I guess, always be comedy. I
mean,
I think
it is the best.
You already do a good enough job promoting that. We don't need to promote that anymore, maybe, Rich.
You're very kind. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, mate. And I will see you on Monday.
God bless you, sir. Thanks for everything and well done. I'm so glad this is going so well, Rich.
Thank you so
much. And I think it's such a testament to you and a reflection on you in terms of how many comedians are so keen to do this chat. So well done, Rich.
Thank you very much, mate. It's very, very kind of you, and all the very best to you.
And remember what Hal Cruttenden said? Comedy needs a lot more Rich Gills, and that's true.
All the best, pal, and thank you.